Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soul Sessions. My name is Alex. It's a pleasure to connect with you again. In our 8th episode here in the new season 5 of the podcast, it's my favorite time in the month when I welcome amazing guests for a rich conversation. I love talking about mental health on this podcast, so it's a real pleasure for me to share a wonderful conversation with Jessica Amos on the topic of coaching and therapy and how complementary these resources can be for our health and wellness. We also talk about relationships and the patterns we both see when holding space for relationality, both in intimate relationships as well as in connections we have with the world around us. I had a lot of fun chatting with Jessica, and I'm super excited to share this episode. Jessica Amos is a life transformation coach, mindfulness meditation teacher, and founder of Stay With Yourself, the practice of being who you are, where you are. With thousands of clients worldwide, Jessica's coaching style is down to earth and conversational, like you are connecting with a safe and trustworthy friend. She hopes you feel deeply supported, encouraged, and inspired by her many mindfulness courses, guided meditations, and private one-on-one coaching programs. You can get access to Jessica's free Soul Thriving Guidebook plus a mini course for big-hearted people at www.staywithyourself.com. I will link her website in the description of this episode as well. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so very much for hanging out with us today. I really wanted to just jump in and dive right into the topic. And I think what will really help a lot of listeners is they've probably heard me talk a lot about therapy over the years, but I think life coaching is such a beautiful part that really kind of it's very complementary, I think, to therapy. It's kind of therapy adjacent in my mind because there's a lot of things that overlap and things that are similar. So before we get into how this sort of strengthens relationships, maybe you can share a little bit about like kind of what life coaching is, your perspective on it, maybe how it differs from therapy, and anything else you want to share.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's like a very wide open door.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll just start by saying, yes, I am my title is life transformation coach. And when you're going into coaching, it's sort of like you have to pick like a title. So basically I'm a life coach. I work with a lot of people come to me for relationship with themselves, to improve their relationship with themselves, their relationships with other people, and their relationship with life. So I see it all as relational. And I believe that's what people go to therapy for as well, too. They go to therapy to improve their relationship with themselves, with other people, and with life. So I agree with you. I think coaching and therapy are very complementary to one another. I have been both a coachee and I've gone to a lot of therapy in my life. So I've been coached and I've gone to a lot of therapy. I've had wonderful therapists and terrible therapists. I've had wonderful coaches and terrible coaches. And so I feel like, again, people are still just people, no matter whether you're working with a therapist or a coach. And I have found that where I like to talk with clients about this a lot, especially potential new clients who come to me who are interested in maybe coaching. I get people who are kind of two different, multiple facets, but usually they're coming for two reasons. One is maybe they're already in therapy, but they just feel like they need a little more. They're still not really, the changes they're needing to make aren't really happening. So they're talking about them, they're processing them, they're doing the deeper work, but like the action and the change just isn't fully taking place. And they're needing that little bit of that fire under their butt. And then I get other people that come to me because they have been going to therapy or they've tried going to therapy and it's just not like resonating with them. So most of the time I get people who are sitting in front of me who are looking for action. and coaching is much less regulated than therapy. I had a friend of mine who's also a coach say it's like the Wild West. Coaching is like the Wild West. It's very unregulated. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that. There's a wonderful, a lot of just like safety around the boundaries that therapy has. Therapists have a lot of rules they have to follow. They have to jump through a lot of hoops. There's a lot of structure and containment, and coaching is way more free. I don't have the same rules, which again makes it the Wild West, but also allows me to work with people differently than they're used to working with a therapist. So I tell them what to do. I give them assignments. They come to me because they want action and they need someone to kind of, I really give them a kick in the butt is like, honestly, my primary role is to kick people in the ass, but also to love them and see them and support them and get intimate with them in a way that I think therapy can't quite do. Because therapists often are seeing sometimes I had a therapist at one point who loved her work. So she was very energized by it, but she would sometimes see up to 10 people in a day. And that to me is insane. But even if you're seeing 5 people a day, 5 days a week, that's 25 people every single week. And as a coach, I work with maybe like 4 to 5 clients, like at a time in a month, so I have a lot more energetic capacity to support my clients. And I think that's also why people come to someone like a coach, because therapists can only go so far and like get in there with you. Yeah. They can only get their hands so dirty with so many clients. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my long version.
It's perfect. It's perfect because I feel like it aligns so perfectly to what I've noticed. And I've been fortunate to have both a therapist and a life coach. And I love that you use the word action because it's exactly how I understand it in my brain and how I see it. Because you're right. Sometimes you come to a therapist and they want to sort of like compartmentalize and like pull on threads that happened in the past and try to make sense of it. But then I feel like the life coach is like, okay, but like, what do I do now with this information? Like I just now opened this box of things, right? All my little skeletons came out of the closet. What do I now do with that? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so I feel like the life coach then is like, okay, these are the next steps so that we can get to this goal that you have, or this next step, or this next big opening that you might have. And I think that's really important. And you're right. There's only so much that a therapist can do. And I feel like sometimes in just speaking as a therapist, we do get a little bit stuck in sometimes in the past and trying to like process and understand why things happen. And all of that's fine and dandy. But yeah, you're right. There is a little bit of like a lack of forward movement. Sometimes I leave sessions with therapists and I'm like, this is wonderful. I understand things, but I don't really know what to like make of this now. What do I now do? What do I want to do? And so I love that there's a field, even if it's a wild west. I love that there's a field that sort of takes that next step and helps people feel more resourceful to make big changes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you made me think of something else about it too, is like, yeah, I have thought about it as it being therapy, often a lot of processing, like maybe you're really starting to realize like, wow, I've been through some shit and I need to like process it. And a lot of times like what coaching does is I tell people like, we're not really going to dig into your past because I trust that you already know what's happened. Like we don't need to keep going there. I'm here to help you like move forward. And if it's relevant, something from the past is really getting you stuck, like hung up now, yes, let's address it. We're not, there's plenty of crossover there, but at the same time it's about that forward movement, that forward action. And as a coach, I love it because I get to be available to my clients like much more than a therapist can be available. So they can kind of trial and error their way through their actions. And I can be there to help them work through, overcoming that. And that I think is one of the most satisfying and rewarding parts is being able to be like in there with people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just you speaking about like energetic capacity is so big because we are, a lot of therapists are they're very burned out and their caseloads are sometimes really unmanageable. And it's becoming quite difficult to hold that space for people in a way where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can really be present with you and not be thinking about, I have 5, 6, 7 other clients I have to see or things to get to. So I like that there's more of a presence and more of an ability to like really stay grounded with the person and like get in there with them, like you said. So these are all really wonderful differences and similarities because like you said, there's a lot of crossover. How do you see this? So in your work as a life coach, what do you really see when it comes to people coming to you for like relationship advice or relationship work, whether it's with themselves or with a partner or with others? What do you see most of when it comes to like any kind of patterns or cycles, healthy or unhealthy, not to necessarily label them, but what
Yeah.
comes up if you had to kind of like zoom out and look at it from that lens?
Yeah, I would say when I zoom out, and again, I think people often when they're coming to me, they're familiar with my work in some kind of way. Sometimes I get like a completely cold lead, but most of the time people are familiar with me in some kind of way. And they know that like my whole brand, my company is called Stay With Yourself.
Mm,
And across the board, even if people are coming to me for relational problems, relational struggles, whether that is like just things, patterns they keep running into, cycles, they know essentially that it has to do with themselves. Like, what can I do to shift me, to shift the situation? And even if they don't recognize that, that's like the first thing we talk about is, and so I would say the number one cycle I see people like come to me with is they're burned out and exhausted in their relationships. They're resentful, they're anxious. And typically because they have learned codependent behaviors, they lack boundaries, they lack, whether that's just boundaries or energetic boundaries, they overgive, they're people please, they're usually big-hearted people with large capacities, like a really large capacity. So it's easy to like for your needs to go unnoticed for a long time because you can be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. You can take care of a lot of people, employees, family, friends, coworkers. Like that's typically the type of person that comes through my door, is someone who is already a fairly high achiever, perfectionistic, type A, is ready to like hit the ground running. And but they also know that they're just not taking care of themselves and they're exhausted and burnt out. And I think that resentment and just the feeling of loss of self, like the feeling of loss of self or feeling out of control within oneself and not grounded and centered, is like really unmooring for a lot of people who are used to having control.
mm,
And they usually hit a point where like they just, it's not in control anymore and they
yeah.
need help. And so that's like kind of where I catch people into, and typically they're already pretty self-aware. They can say what the problems are. And they just need someone to kind of have second eyes on them and help them like see things differently and come back to like who they are, or even rediscover who they are after so long of taking care of everyone but themselves. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's still always the number one problem.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah. If I, even just thinking about it, like in my own life, that I feel like I'm like, oh, I'm a little bit like those clients too. Like there's a lot of,
Mhm.
I think a lot of us probably go into therapy for that reason. Subconsciously, it's just like, oh, we're really comfortable with taking care of other people, really comfortable with like holding space and sitting and listening to people's, struggles and pain. And it's just such a familiar ground. And then you realize like, oh, okay, but I'm also a little bit like that person that kind of places myself last, even though I'm
Yeah.
telling my clients, right, quite the opposite, and we're working on different things. So I love that, in your work, there's that kind of like reclamation of self in a lot of ways of
Mhm.
what do I need to do to place myself back online so that I'm also taking care of myself. And I would imagine that this comes with a lot of like just like emotional sort of witnessing and just realizing how much maybe they have placed themselves last in relationships, and that can kind of feel like a little like almost like a bit of a kick in the heart sometimes of like,
Yeah.
oh wow, I really have put myself last like a lot of times.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is. It's like it hurts. Like it does it like hurts. And also it's like kind of a relief to recognize it. And I would say that like I relate a lot because I'm also that type of person. I think that's what makes us good for this work, whether it's a therapist or a coach. Like we're good for this work and in this work for people who are similar in that way. They have big hearts and they care a lot. And when you start realizing that you have to start caring for yourself, I think it's a big reclamation of self, and it's very powerful, and it's an honor actually, to be the person to be able to help hand them back to themselves in a way, and to see them, because I think that that's a big part of it, is just witnessing people. And really, people can tell if you're bullshitting them or not around if you see them. And I think it's a special gift to be able to really see people and to reflect back that you see them, and for them to know that what you're saying is true, because you're speaking to what's like deep inside that was buried. And I think that's like, yeah, it's super emotional. It's and very powerful. And then when you see them kind of like get traction around that, the changes and the things that start to unfold and expand in their life is just incredible to witness as well too. It's always like even better than they could have imagined most of the time. And there's a lot of shit that falls apart too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of things sort of start to get released or questioned maybe.
Yeah.
I know when relationships come up in therapy, a lot of times it does kind of tie it back to like the past and like your first like sort of prime relationships with like parents and caregivers, and where does that come from, and all these like sort of all this therapy talk, which I think is important, and it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense in the context.
Totally.
And then you kind of get to understand like, oh, this is how I show up in my relationships as a result of what I've seen to be a
Yep.
relationship. Whether it was healthy or unhealthy, right? We don't know that when we're young. We sort of maybe know that when we get to be a little bit older. Not always. And I feel like that's when we
Yeah.
seek out help. Like you said, like that perspective, like, hey, that might be a red flag, might be like orange flags, but
Yeah.
maybe not going in the best direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it all really, a lot of it goes back to like our primal relationships and our primary relationships with the caretakers in our life when we were young, and how we learned to relate, and the mechanisms that we developed to create a sense of safety, so it makes sense. Like, it all makes sense why we sort of just developed the way that we developed. And again, that's why we end up in therapy or we end up with coaching. And a lot of people with both, which I love, is because like it's not working. Like the mechanisms that we built to like cope and survive aren't working in our relationships, all the things that worked when we were young. And that's where like a real sort of like crux happens for people around, we have to change this pattern. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, again, the crossover therapy and coaching is, oh, wow, I'm seeing it. You're seeing all of it now. And then the tough work of changing the pattern, changing the cycle in real time. And it's not an easy thing, but it's also necessary.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. You must face it. And plenty of people try not to and don't.
Yeah.
But it's that whole quote about, the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud became more painful than the risk it took to bloom. It's like, you're going to be in pain either way. So you might as well be in the pain that moves towards a blooming.
Yes. This actually reminds me of, I really hope this is the correct person who said this. I think the quote is from Elizabeth Gilbert, who said, I think something, I'm always going to butcher these, but something to the effect of, you really, things really start to change when you kind of get tired of your own bullshit. When you get to a point where you're like, oh, like I've been going around the same cycle over and over, whether it's with myself or with a partner or a family, and something's got to give. And I think that is when you, like you said, like you kind of have to walk through the fire a little bit, and you have to face some difficult things that are not always going to be pleasant. I actually had this conversation recently about someone who was talking about just any kind of personal development work, whether it is therapy or life coaching or really anything, and mentioning how it's not always like happy. He's like, well, when I go into sessions or when I work with these people, I don't always leave feeling happy. And I'm like, I would imagine that a lot of times there's going to be a lot of not happiness after sessions, because you're just like opening these wounds and kind of removing these band-aids and ignorance, and being flooded with so much information now that's just been sitting there. It's not always going to be a pleasant experience. So I'm wondering, like in your practice, how do you sort of navigate that with potential, like with clients or even potential clients, like kind of exposing them to like, there's a risk involved in this. And the risk is like a lot of emotionality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty direct with people before we ever work together. And I have a pretty big paywall wall around my coaching too. And so that sometimes is just like, that to me is always people's line. If they decide to cross over that line and invest in coaching and really put that forth, like put their money where their mouth is, a lot of times, like I find that there's not a lot of crying and whining and like, they're like ready to go, you know, and because you kind of have to be if you're gonna like step in. And that's why I put it there. Like I put it there as this piece. And I will say that I am very fortunate to like, there's a certain place I won't go with people because I'm not a therapist. And I have that conversation with people too. I go, you're probably more at a place where you need to keep going to therapy and like really processing like on the week. Like I know that I'm not equipped. And that's also where I know my limits as a coach. Like I know that I'm not your person if you're like deep in the shit, like
Yes.
really deep in it. And like it's all that stuff is really coming up. There's a certain level of having to already have done some work and some awareness, at least for people who come into my sphere in my space. But it doesn't mean that when we get in there that those moments don't happen. And it's strange, but maybe not strange. But to me, I always have a very positive response to a person breaking down. I'm always like, congratulations. I'm so happy you're here. This is exactly where you need to be. I always lead with a lot of affirmation in those situations, not to like, it's not to diminish the pain, but it's to really affirm like, yes, this is so good. This is so good. I'm so glad this is happening. And like, this is what we're going to do now. And I think that that's really, I find that my clients typically find that really supportive. You know, I'm not, and I'm also not very much of I don't go, oh, poor thing either. And I think that that's part of why it works for my clients. But there's people who absolutely would never work with me because I wouldn't, you know, coddle them as much as they maybe want to be, or they're just not in a place to, they are still needing to process.
Yeah, that's fair. And I really prefer, actually, even in my own therapy, I prefer a lot more of like a direct approach. Because I, you know, like just for myself, like I know myself well enough where I know my loopholes, I know my sort of excuses, I know my little like alleys that I dip into. And I don't need you to just let me wander through all my stuff. I do need you to kind of pull me back and be like, no, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. We're not going to entertain this thought or this fear or whatever the case is. So that directness, for some people, I can understand it works beautifully, right? They need that structure. Whereas I can see how some people might be a little bit more like, I do want you to kind of I don't think it's a lack of validation. I think like the coddling, and I understand it fully. It's this sort of like, a lot of this is, you know, understanding, I think in relationships, especially, that we're also kind of contributing a little bit to some of the things that we might be like complaining about. So like that can be like a really hard pill to swallow for some people, and for myself as well. Like, what do you mean it's also my fault, you know? So that, you know, but how do you bring that up gingerly, or to a point where like, you're also kind of walking this two-way street, and how much of this are you really putting in? I personally love like ripping that off and just going right into it. Whereas I can see some people might just really fall apart at that and be like, oh my God, this feels very invalidating.
Totally. Yeah. And I like those people, like because I'm very direct and I'm a direct woman, which I think is sometimes like not always read all that well by other women. Men respond really well to directness, and women who have a more direct quality to them respond really well to directness. And I respond really well. I love directness because I love being told what to do. Because I think as a high capacity person, or a person who takes care of a lot, or a person who, you know, I love being told like, this is it, this is the thing. I see it there and I'm like, oh, thank God. It lifts an emotional burden from me. But yes, not everybody loves that. But I like what you said about like how you like being called out on your patterns and like all your little things, and what it's very important. I do too, because I think there's something to like probably being intellectual on some level, or having to take care, like we know how to navigate and get through things and survive. And we're wanting someone to like hold us accountable to our stuff. And I think that's also, like, I had a client that I met with just this morning, and we're talking, and he was kind of bringing up a situation with another person. And I felt like we weren't quite, we were finding our way to an understanding of him listening and me hearing, and both of us listening and both of us offering. And I think at one point I just said, I think the important thing here is that you are honoring yourself. Like, are you? And it was so simple. It wasn't even a profound thing. And he was like, okay, that landed for me. So I think a lot of times when we are talking about relationships with other people, it doesn't have to, it is like, yes, what's the part that you're playing? Yeah. But the part that people often aren't playing is they're not honoring themselves in that relating. They're so focused on the other that they're not thinking about what would be most honoring for themselves. And it was such a gentle, really the most gentle way anyone could say, hey, let's bring it back to you. And it was even surprising to me that it landed really strongly in that moment. And so you don't even really always know, but gentle, it can be gentle, it can be direct, but it can be kind too.
I think I love that a lot in any kind of work that or anytime someone's holding space for me in that way. Just knowing like, I know where I dip into and where I kind of hide into, and you might not know that, but after some time, I would so appreciate it if you just pulled me out of that, or like yanked me out of that. Because sometimes, because I can't do it myself. Because if I could, then I would just be doing this.
I wouldn't need you. Yeah.
I would just rely totally on my own sort of inner guidance. But, when we're talking about like a lot of these like little terms start to come to mind, like setting boundaries and being more self-aware and sort of like honoring ourselves. I mean, all of these are obviously incredibly important in any relationship, but what do you think from your work, whether that bleeds into the personal or kind of stays more in the professional, but what do you think are really sort of like the tenets that you think create like a strong, healthy relationship that people might be like, oh yeah, I know those things, but do we really? Like something that might need to be like repeated again and again.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk to anybody and anyone's going to have a different opinion on this, like for sure. And I think about this a lot because there are a lot of ways a person could go, but I find that like for me, like across the board, like the number one tenet in any kind of healthy relationship is respect. Like respect is number one. Like first off, respecting the other person is like, if you don't respect the person you're with, there's like already, this is not going to work. And if they don't respect you, if there's not respect coming there for you, no one wants to be in a relationship where there's not mutual respect. And then there has to be self-respect too. So I think respect is like number one. A lot of people say it's communication. I say it's respect. And I think communication is important too, but I think that understanding that we all communicate differently. So it's like being willing and open to receive how another person communicates, and to understand that this is not about it needing to look a certain way. We get very stuck on it needing to look a certain way. So I think there has to be like, it's kind of like it falls in the same category as like love language. Like the best example is love languages, right? So I love words of affirmation. I love them. I love them. But I've also been around people who are really, really good with words of affirmation, but they like lack integrity around action and following through with some of their words. So I don't really love words when they're empty, right? Like I don't. Like I love affirmation, but not just people who are just stroking my ego. I also really love action. And I love it when people like show me who they are. And I realize that I think I might love that more than I love words of affirmation. Because when you like live in alignment and act in alignment with who you are, like I love that. So anyway, these are all ways that we communicate that like might not be direct. Like my partner is an act. He's like a service person. He's like a gifts and an acts of service type of person. And sometimes I'm like, you did not tell me that you made plans last weekend for the thing. And I already made my plans. And so now we have to figure that out, because just basic communication like that sometimes, but the overall communication of love and respect and kindness and care and showing up every day and putting in the effort, that is there, even though, does that make sense? Yeah, so I think there's like a certain level of care. Like I've worked at like respect and like showing care and receiving, being willing to receive how another person shows you, and like opening yourself to that, I think is like, that is a relationship hack that I think would solve so many relationships if people were just willing to see that, oh, this person is showing me they love me in their way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much, because I talk about love languages all the time, and I work with high school kids, so explaining a love language to like a 16-year-old is very different. They're like, what? And trying to like, kind of like open their eyes a little bit to like, hey, how you want to receive love or how you give love, it might be very different than your partner. Like there's a little bit of like this space in between where there's might be compromise, and you understanding that they might not like physical touch. They might choose something different. Like, so finding that middle ground. I personally love that. And I also love words of affirmation, probably my favorite. I also really love like acts of service. And that, I think a lot of that comes from just like my own upbringing. Like sometimes love isn't shown in words. A lot of times it's shown in like, oh, well, I made you a meal, or I did laundry, or whatever. Things like that. So that to me is very natural and normal, the way like I grew up with it. So I love love languages. And it reminded me of something that you were talking about. Like, I love also how you said respect for in your practice, or the way that you conceptualize it is like number one, because I could probably count many people who would always put communication as number one. And which, we're like, okay, it's important. That's cool. Like, it's nice to like be upfront and be honest and communicate. But to your point, like if that respect isn't there, I feel like sometimes people might get into the loophole of like, well, I can communicate my way into that, or I can communicate my way around that. What I'm hearing is like, no, it's either there or it's not there. You don't use your words to get into the respect,
Well, and I would say that I've even learned that more from personal experience. Like I've been in the relationships where, we're communicating all the time. We're talking about everything all the time. We're constantly talking about everything. It's almost like exhausting, like honestly. Like, I mean, and I get like I get the point of like, it's important to be able to talk about things, and I'm not really afraid to talk about things, but like there's also just, that respect piece. And sometimes when you know that there's respect, and you know that there's love, you know that there's care, there's not as much to talk about, And I think that's okay too. And I also think it's okay. I love that you love the love languages, because like, it's okay that I can say, hey, I want some more words of affirmation, and my partner can work on affirming me, and he could want more physical touch, and I can give more physical touch, and it's okay that like, and I think that's beautiful that we would see that our partner or people in our life would work on those things with us. My grandpa years ago was like, hey, I want you to be in touch more. And I was like, I hear you. I've heard you. He keeps asking me to be in touch. He's my grandfather, right? And he's getting older, and he wants to hear from his granddaughter. Okay, Pop, how do you want to hear from me? Do you want me to text you? He's like, no, I hate texting. I was like, do you want me to email you? He's like, no, I want you to call me. I want you to call me on the phone. And my cousins were like, oh, we don't even use phones. And I was like, I can call you, Pop. He's like, you don't even need to call me for more than 5 minutes. I just want you to call me on the phone. I'll talk to you for 5 minutes. And I was like, I'll call you for I can call you for 5 minutes. I can do that. And now I've like fostered over the course of years a deeper relationship with my grandfather because I've been willing to call him and say, hey, I only have 5 minutes and we can talk for 5 minutes. And then I made the practice of calling him every week. And then he started calling me. And it's beautiful because I have cousins who are like, I don't call anybody and I don't like using the phone, right? And so sometimes we get stuck in our stubborn ways of like, I don't really love talking on the phone either. But my grandfather's asking for some phone calls. And like, I think I'm going to feel pretty regretful if I don't show up and make those calls, knowing that they only need to be 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think that's like the perfect example of like how you show up and almost like how you practice the love languages in a way, because you're right. Some people can get really, really, really stuck in, oh, well, I don't do words of affirmation. I don't know what that's like. Or like, what is that? Like, I don't feel comfortable. And like, you know, you almost like zooming out and thinking like, okay, this relationship obviously means a lot to me. And I want to maintain it and I want to show up for it and I want to be here. That might require me to do some things that are maybe inconvenient. And then what is that all about? And then to like put in that effort and maybe meet halfway. I do find that you're right. It kind of is like a relationship hack in a lot of ways. And, you know, what are you willing to like really work for? And I think sometimes we get lost in the semantics and like the little technicalities and things, but they're not really, they're not as big of a challenge as I think sometimes people make them out.
Yeah. I think people are just stubborn. They're stubborn and they just decide like, I don't want to, I don't like to, or I'm not going to unless they. And I would say that's a major, I tell my clients this, I'm like, well, that's just a violation of yourself. Like, because like we want to pour with love. We want to love the people. We want to express ourselves in loving ways. And if we're holding back loving people, if we're holding back the words of affirmation and the acts of service and the phone calls, if we're holding that stuff back just because someone else isn't doing their part, you're just really robbing yourself of living in the fullest expression of being a loving person. I feel like way better knowing that like I'm pouring with the love that I have. And if another person receives it or doesn't receive it or gives it back, like it's not really love if I'm trying to like, if I'm doing it to get it back. And I think that's also where respect comes in too. Like if you really love and respect this person, you love and respect them regardless of whether or not they love you back. Like you want the best for them. And so you can love them knowing, of course, most relationships, like there's no guarantee, whether that's romantic or friendship or me with my grandfather, he's older, you know, he just turned 90. So it's like, not everyone's going to be around forever. So just knowing that you showed up with your heart, and that sometimes means walking away sometimes if it's not reciprocated. And that's a big part of what I work with people on too, is the action of leaving. I've worked with more clients on leaving relationships and starting new ones than probably anything else, or finding a way to be at peace in the relationships they're in. And it's through these nuances, and it all comes back to ourselves and living with ourselves and not creating pain for ourselves because we've decided some narrative about how it needs to be.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think, I think that getting stuck in that space where I see this so often also with like, oh, but if they're not willing to, then I'm not willing to, and who's going to take the initiative? And if he or she doesn't, does that mean that, you know, then that must mean X, Y, and Z, and all these like sort of like really deeply ingrained stories that you're just like, wow, like, you know, if anybody were to come in and sort of challenge that line of thinking, like what would happen if that wasn't the case, right? What would happen if you realize that story is actually a story and not this like hardwired truth, you know, that's like universal and will live forever into infinity. You know, and that like that kind of direction, like that kind of directness sometimes for some, I've noticed for some clients, like you said, like sometimes it
Yeah.
lands, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's like you really sort of pull the rug from under them. But
Yeah.
but I love that, because you're right. Like it's this unconditional, like people talk unconditional love all the time. Like, what is that? And I feel like this
Yeah.
is kind of what makes me think of that. Like, I love this person, or I love my partner, or I love my cat, or I love my family. And I don't expect this thing to come back to me in order for me to value this love. Like it just
Yeah.
is. Like I
Yes.
give it. And if you receive it, that's beautiful and we can have a great thing. But if it doesn't
Yeah.
come back to me, then maybe that's a good indication that, like you said, that leaving part, and
Yeah.
which is obviously very hard, but also very
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah. No, I mean, totally. Exactly. We're not even giving ourselves the full chance to find out if a relationship is viable a lot of the time when we are telling ourselves these stories and we're stuck in these stories, or we stay stuck in things that we shouldn't be. But those stories, man, I mean, and if a person's really attached to their story, there's not a lot you can do for that.
Yeah.
Like a person has to be willing to see things differently and be willing to like write a new story and have a new story. And again, that's the crossover between coaching and therapy. That's so much of the work done in therapy is like, where did that story come from and why? And how have I been carrying that story with me from relationship to relationship to relationship? And how has that story repeated itself? Like there's something that comes with like looking at the full picture of how you've maybe carried that story with you everywhere. And you kind of start to see that, oh, I haven't just felt this with my partner. I felt it with my friends. I felt it with past relationships. I felt it with my parents. I feel it with the grocery store clerk, depending on the day. Like, oh, okay. So this is my story that I'm creating. And it's like, it's pretty mind blowing. And I think about it even for myself, and I don't even, it's a lot to unravel for sure. And I think that's where, again, I really appreciate the work that people do in therapy. And I know therapists are exhausted. I know there's some exhausted coaches too, but like I see how exhausted therapists are. And I wish that we had more therapists and more people in therapy and more less exhausted therapists and more I wish we had more of it. I want everyone to be doing the therapy, and then I want everyone to be working with a coach too. And then like we can all be processing it, facing it, working on it together, and then also growing and expanding and taking new actions on it. Like to me, that would be literally the ideal worlds, is everyone recognizing, kind of waking up from this illusion of the stories we've been telling ourselves and looking around and finding out that we're not alone in that, and practicing together. And I think that's the beautiful thing too, is finding people to practice with and talk to about it. And even conversations like this, hopefully, for people listening, it's like, oh, okay, it's not just, we're not isolated in it.
Yeah, no, it's such a universal thing. That we all have, we all have stories, and we all have, and they are so deep sometimes. And you're right. Some people are not willing to necessarily even consider that there might be an alternative story or something else possible. And so they like hold tight. And one of my professors always used to say, if you're working harder than your client, and you'll know
Yeah.
it. Like, you're rowing the boat, like you are just going, and this person is just not doing it at all.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're like, listen, like I'm not the one necessarily that that is going to benefit as greatly from changing this story. And if you're not ready, then, and that's okay. And that happens. Some people are just really, it's familiar and it's safe, even though it might not be safe. But and whenever that time is for them to decide. But yeah, you're right. Some people just don't make that choice. And but I love that, again, like this crossover and talking about relationships, so much happens. And in the last like few minutes, I want to just like affirm that this is really, I think, the best of both worlds, having a therapist and having a coach and having a lot of people who do a lot of different things, having that as almost like a support system and a team, because you do need them. And it's not just one or the other. I think everybody can take it in different directions, and we can process what happened in the past, and we can talk about what's happening currently. But like everybody, I think, comes up eventually to that question of, okay, but what do I do next? And I feel like that's kind of where I see coaching being like kind of opening the door and like, okay, this is now what's possible beyond this space. Yeah, I agree. I think everybody should have a coach, and I think everybody should invest in that, because you don't always know what to do, and you don't always know how to like mold that information into something tangible. So with that said, this is now your chance and your time to share anything that you're working on, or share where people can get in touch with you and continue these conversations, because I think they're incredible. And I think everybody should connect with you and see how you can best support them.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah. Well, this has been such a fun conversation. I've loved it. I've loved talking with you. Okay. So there's multiple things. First, I'll just tell you where to find me. You can find me at staywithyourself.com. Staywithyourself.com. You can also literally, if you Google Jessica Amos or Stay With Yourself, like I pretty sure I come up in the rankings there. So staywithyourself.com. It's where you can learn about my coaching and book a free 30-minute discovery call to talk with me about whether or not it's a good fit for you. And I love, love, love having those calls, just processing through what that might look like. So my coaching program is like literally my favorite offering, and it's like just the deep dive into all things you. I also have courses, like I have a 10x course bundle on there, and I have my Sacred Habits course and Learn to Meditate. And you can take any of my courses and get familiar with my work too. If you're not quite ready to work with me, you can you can do one of my courses. But the thing I'm really also very excited about, and I'm just putting this together, it'll probably be born by the time people are listening to this, is I'm actually putting together a free mini course. It's called the Soul Thriving Guidebook, and it's a little 6-part mini course. And it's literally just for like the type of people that we were talking about. People who are like usually big-hearted, like take care of a lot of things. A lot of people maybe aren't putting themselves back on their to-do list. And typically people that have some kind of spiritual aspect to themselves, which we didn't even get into today, but I find that that's kind of important in doing some of this work. So I just put together this little 6-part mini course, and it's meant to be like you sign up for this and then you end up on my email list, and then you get these 6 little emails that are kind of walk you through the 6 little parts to living a soul thriving life. And I love it. I just recorded the videos for it yesterday, and I'm putting together all the content for it now, and it's free. So you can sign up for it, get all the emails, and then unsubscribe if you want to. But I love, I'm a writer at heart and a storyteller at heart too. So I tell a lot of stories and I share a lot of things just for free. I do a lot of free stuff. So when you sign up for that, you're going to get all my free things that come with it. So I'm very excited about offering that. And that's a way to get familiar with me too, is just, taking the free offering and booking a call.
Yeah. Awesome. I will have this linked, your website, in the description, so people can just click on it,
Nice.
and find you and connect with you. I love that. I can resonate with being a writer. And so I feel like a lot of times when you're like really with words, you're like, I'm just going to pour all this stuff out. I just have so much to say, and here, please take and benefit from it and use it, and share it. So I'm happy to share it. I will absolutely love to share this with folks who need it. I know a lot of people who could benefit from this, and who could just find this to be enriching for themselves, but also with their relationships and partners and families and all kinds of things. So I really appreciate so much your time today and this really, really fun chat. I will definitely love to have you back, but thank you so much. I love it. I'm happy to share this and have folks connect with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Of course.